Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @ CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 25th of February 2026 from the opinion section. Edinburgh Airport Chief Gordon Dewar's exit and why it was a surprise. This article is by Ian McConnell. News of the departure of Edinburgh Airport Chief Executive Gordon Dewar came as such a surprise last week, writes business editor Ian McConnell. It was probably the sheer momentum of Edinburgh Airport and Gordon Dewar's clear enthusiasm for building on this and confidence about the future that meant news last week of his departure came as such a surprise. I interviewed Mr. Dewar twice last year, and he seemed on both occasions to be buoyed by the airport's growth and in no doubt that further new flight wins would be landed. And there is certainly no reason to believe that this is still not the case. News of Mr. Dewar's departure came hard on the heels of some stellar passenger numbers for 2025 being reported by Edinburgh Airport in late January. And he has propelled passenger numbers higher at Edinburgh Airport since he returned to take the top job in 2012. Obviously, the corona pandemic period was the exception to this, but the airport rebuilt connectivity fast as Scotland emerged from that grim time. Mr. Dewar has certainly, for most of the time since 2012, enjoyed a much greater tailwind than his counterparts at Glasgow Airport. That said, Cam Jandu, who became Chief Executive of Glasgow Airport, owner AGS Airports, last January, following the takeover by the Canadian Public Sector Pension Investment Board's Avi Alliance platform of AGS from Ferrovial and Macquarie, has in recent months had a flurry of new flight wins to announce himself. So too has Mr. Dewar, as Edinburgh Airport has also continued to prosper. This should surely reinforce belief that there is plenty of room for growth at Scotland's biggest two passenger airports. There are various reasons why this should be so, including the potential to offer direct flights to numerous destinations, which many passengers currently travel to from Glasgow or Edinburgh by connecting through other places. Mr. Dewar, when I interviewed him in February last year, made no bones about Glasgow Airport being Edinburgh's nearest competitor and the degree of the rivalry. He also highlighted airports across Western Europe as competitors in the drive to win routes. And Mr. Jandu, for his part, highlighted when I spoke to him in April last year a desire to win back passengers which Glasgow Airport considers to be in its natural catchment area. Noting he knew Mr. Dewar, Mr. Jandu observed, maybe about 14% of the people who could be flying from here are making the trip to Edinburgh. He added, our goal is not to steal anything that wasn't naturally ours back from Edinburgh. Our natural market share has shrunk over the last decade, and that is not right. Asked what had caused the drop in market share at Glasgow Airport, Mr. Jandu replied, "The main reason is because there are more airlines that took the decision to fly from Edinburgh, whatever the reason." Mr. Dewar asked for his view on Glasgow Airport's major investment in its terminal building and its talk about regaining traffic from its natural catchment area when I interviewed him last May, seemed a little less combative in tone about the degree of competition with his rival than in February 2025. He said last May, I guess they are articulating their objectives and what they would like to do, and good luck with it. I am not overly perturbed by their announcement. I can understand why they have these aspirations. While news of Mr. Dewar's exit was somewhat out of the blue, it is worth noting the length of time he has been in the top post at Edinburgh Airport. And Mr. Dewar, who will be 60 next month, is very much staying around for now. The airport said it expected Mr. Dewar will leave his role towards the end of 2026, following the search for his successor. Edinburgh Airport, which has been majority owned by Paris-based Vinci, VINCI, Airport since 2024, noted Mr. Dewar's second tenure as CEO saw passenger numbers grow dramatically by 85%, from 9 million in 2012 to almost 17 million in 2025. It added, he steered the airport through the COVID pandemic, where passenger numbers fell to almost zero, and its subsequent recovery. Mr. Dewar appeared in upbeat form as he announced his plans to depart in a press release issued last Wednesday. He declared, "In my remaining months, I look forward to helping find my successor and to continue driving the momentum of this business that has the brightest of futures and limitless opportunities. I will also be able to use that time to show my appreciation and thanks to all who have shaped this amazing journey and will continue to do so." Mr. Dewar was last May keen to highlight the economic contribution of Edinburgh Airport and its importance in providing major employment, not just directly, but on the campus as a whole. The airport chief observed these job numbers totalled nearly 8,000, including around 1,000 people employed directly by the airport. He also came across as passionate about the part that the airport can play in supporting housing and infrastructure development in West Edinburgh. Mr. Dewar last May estimated Edinburgh Airport's annual contribution to the economy would by that stage have risen to at least £1.6 billion. Asked then about the airport's capacity in the context of its rapid increase in passenger numbers in recent years, and the further expansion of flights projected, he replied, "We have to build quickly, but we are not at the stage of being full yet. That has been true since 2012, where, apart from COVID, we have been in a constant build program to keep up with that demand. We have got the space, we have got the funding. It is just a matter of getting it all lined up and making sure it lands the day before it is needed." Mr. Dewar at that stage highlighted the extent to which overall passenger growth at Edinburgh Airport had been driven by international flights. He also flagged the airport's success in building inbound traffic, highlighting the attraction of Edinburgh to overseas visitors. And he underlined the scale of the growth in the long-haul segment at Edinburgh Airport and the general reduction in domestic traffic as things he did not foresee when he became chief executive. Mr. Dewar said, "The ratio of international traffic we have is higher. All the growth is international. We have increased our proportion of inbound passenger traffic. The American routes, they tend to be stronger inbound demand." it did not appear that he was affording himself any significant euphoria over the somewhat spectacular increase in passenger numbers at Edinburgh Airport when asked about this in the interview last May, although he was in confident enough form. Asked then if he would in 2012 have envisaged passenger numbers being where they were by last May, Mr. Dewar replied, "We had a 5-year plan in 2012, which we slightly bettered. 13 years later, the mix is slightly different from what I expected. No one would have seen the reduction in domestic and during COVID. He declared that no one would have seen the growth in long haul." Edinburgh Airport said in late January that 16,980,588 passengers travelled through it during 2025, up from 15,792,395 passengers in the previous year. In 2023, Edinburgh Airport's passenger numbers totalled 14,396,794. The announcement of Mr. Dewar's departure last week, while out of the blue, was also somewhat low-key. That said, while he may not be the type to pop the champagne corks, Mr. Dewar looks to be leaving at a time when Edinburgh Airport remains very much on an upward trajectory. That article was by Ian McConnell. This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday the 25th of February 2026 from the opinion section. Stripping Andrew of his title doesn't cleanse the institution. This article is by Callum Steele. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's scandals weren't lapses. They were bred by a system that shields its own and punishes perception, not behaviour, argues Herald columnist Callum Steele. There is something of a strange habit that exists amongst former cops. When they get together and invariably share war stories about the most despicable folk they locked up, the subject of the conversation is usually referred to by the full name their mother gave them. It no doubt stems from the working practice drilled into you from day one that you record first name, all middle names, surnames, nicknames, and aliases from anyone whose details ever made their way into your notebook. On top of that, any accused who subsequently found themselves convicted has their Sunday name read out in all its glory before sentence is passed, and in some small psychological way giving someone their full handle reinforces their position in our minds as cretins worthy of extreme disdain. Revelling in the misfortunes of others is, after all, a pastime we indulge in more often than we care to admit. You would think, therefore, that the endless references to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, AMW, would create a schadenfreude pool so deep that I'd soak in it for hours. A man, I was going to say, more worthy of disdain, you would struggle to find. But he is sadly one in a long list of those disgraced in the Epstein files, although to be fair he has worked harder than most to earn the pillorying he now receives. The hyphen in the new abridged name means nothing, as you don't see it when you say it. He is now merely a triple-named man, like the hundreds of thousands of others recorded on police systems across the country, and he deserves all the notoriety and dripping contempt that goes with it. Yet I find myself jarred whenever the three names are employed. Not because I feel a second of sympathy for him, but because this linguistic demotion is not about Andrew at all. It is about the survival instincts of an institution that protects itself first, last, and always. The House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha has form here. It may not be renowned for deft public relations, but has no hesitation in acting when the stench of association started clinging to them all after years of apparent myopia at the behaviours of its Prince Andrew. The royal household is awash with staff. Valets, servants, private secretaries, and countless others besides are in near constant contact with those they work for. So too the British government civil servants who support trade ambassadors and who, through the police, sustain and provide security for them. They know who comes and goes, the company kept, the reputations whispered about, and they know how those who they work for are spoken about behind their backs. Andrew's past behaviours and associations are hardly news. His sense of entitlement and general oafishness has been common knowledge for decades. A blundering ignoramus and renowned philanderer, he held a unique status amongst the police officers I know who have been involved in providing security for the royals. He was uniquely despised. Little wonder a former royalty protection officer recently revealed his nickname amongst officers was synonymous with meeting someone the day after the upcoming Monday. And yet, for all of these personal qualities, what did the royal household do? Where was the concern? Where was the action? The never complain, never explain doctrine that has served it so well for over a century was fully deployed, and for as long as nothing provable forced their hand, he remained free to enjoy the titles, status, and privileges afforded to him by virtue of his birth. Spare me the indignity that we now see. The royal household has shown it is more than a master of the dark arts when it wants to be. The innumerable briefings and leaks about another of its princes, this time Harry, more than reveals the willingness to be brutal when it suits. The treatment of Harry tells us much about what was deemed tolerable and what was not. The reported payment of £12 million to settle a civil lawsuit over a sexual assault allegation was swallowed. But a man seeking to ensure the privacy, safety, and security of his wife and family was a bridge too far. The pomp of letters patent, which declared that AMW has been entitled to hold and enjoy the style, title, or attribute of Royal Highness and the titular dignity of Prince, and that by declaration he shall no longer be able to do so, are one thing. But, and I suspect this was the absolute intention, they have been taken to mean something else entirely. Just because Andrew is formally stripped of his titles doesn't mean we need to pretend. Using AMW won't erase the fact that this was a prince whose conduct sullied the institution. Let's pretend that by continual use of AMW, we demote the prince to the status of mere commoner, for the nobility could never be sullied by such opprobrium. Prince Andrew may not be allowed to call himself a prince, but that doesn't demand the rest of us cannot do so. The tedious repetition in every single newspaper, radio station, and television news program of AMW is giving the royal household, and for that matter the British government, a free pass here. Every accusation he is facing has come about from his behaviour whilst officially and unquestionably a prince. His access, his money, his travel, security, secrecy, every single aspect has only been possible because he is a member of the titled nobility. He is one of theirs. They should own that and not be allowed to forget it. Let us not be fooled by the ceremonial stripping of titles. The institution endures, while a man coddled for so long is now sacrificed. Andrew's behaviours are not some isolated moral lapse. They were made possible, facilitated, and shielded by the very system that now gestures indignantly at his name. Every private jet, every closed-door meeting, every palace tour, every loophole exploited, every whispered excuse was a function of his birthright. And for decades, the highest echelon of the state looked the other way, secure in the knowledge that the monarchy itself could not be touched. Now, with AMW paraded in headlines like some linguistic punishment, the establishment demonstrates what it always has. It can sacrifice its members when necessary, but never itself. We should call it what it is: performative nonsense, masking, unflinching, institutional self-preservation. That article was by Callum Steele.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 26th of February 2026, from the news section. Angus Robertson accuses BBC of misinformation on Scotland. By Brian Ferguson, arts correspondent. Culture Secretary Angus Robertson has accused the BBC of having a systemic problem with its treatment of Scotland in its network news coverage. He suggested Scots were paying the BBC a licence fee for misinformation and misreporting because news reports did not accurately reflect decisions made in the Scottish Parliament. Mr Robertson, who was giving evidence to a Holyrood inquiry into the broadcasting industry, suggested viewers and listeners in Scotland were being let down by UK network news coverage, which continues to fall short in accurately reflecting the devolved landscape of the UK. He claimed that news stories with substantial relevance to Scotland were regularly overlooked, inaccurately framed, or incorporated only as an afterthought in UK-wide coverage. Mr Robertson also suggested that the BBC bosses in London think they can get away with misleading licence fee payers in Scotland. The Culture Secretary, who previously worked as a journalist with the BBC World Service, was speaking 2 weeks after complaining to the BBC Director General, Tim Davie, about inaccuracies about Radio 4's reporting on the Scottish budget and their reluctance to put a correction out on air. In his letter of complaint to Mr Davie, Mr Robertson said, "This is a fundamental failure in BBC network coverage of a landmark annual devolution event." Speaking at Holyrood's Culture Committee, Mr Robertson expressed dismay at controversial plans by STV to overhaul its news programmes, which have put dozens of jobs at risk, branding them an unnecessary erosion of news provision. He said it was vital that the audiences in Scotland were able to access a plurality of news that is duly accurate, duly impartial and trusted. He added, "It's essential that public service news providers meet their core obligations meaningfully, ensuring that coverage accurately reflects Scotland's influence. UK network news continues to fall short in adequately and accurately reflecting the devolved landscape of the UK. Too often, stories with substantial relevance to Scotland are either overlooked, inaccurately framed, or incorporated only as an afterthought in UK-wide coverage. Improving representation is not simply a matter of fairness, it's a core requirement of public sector broadcasting. audiences in Scotland must be able to rely on UK network news to give them a full, balanced and accurate account of the issues which affect them. Mr Robertson said that misreporting of headline announcements in the budget, which Mr Davey apologised for, reflected the inability of the BBC to report the realities of the devolution and asymmetrical nature of governance in the UK. He added, "I think there is a problem and I think it's systemic. What I find is very frustrating is that these issues have been raised repeatedly recently. This morning, the Today programme managed to report at length about student loans without at any point at all pointing out that this was only relevant in one part of the UK. The BBC has a systemic problem in its news coverage in relation to commission and omission. They have guidelines. They are not fulfilling them. We have commitments that they will be sorting this out. To be absolutely frank, I don't think they are at all. It is another example of why broadcasting should be devolved, because the BBC, frankly, and others think that they can get away with it. It is actually a matter of misleading licensed payers in Scotland by misreporting or not reporting things which should be accurately reported by a public service broadcaster. It is not good enough and it must change." Mr Robertson said he was absolutely clear that full devolution of the broadcasting industry was needed to ensure that the needs of audiences and the creative industries in Scotland were fully met. He told the Culture Committee, "I appreciate that it's not simple for the BBC. I've said this to them. They're not going to get it right all of the time, but they need to do a lot better. Ultimately, I think the only solution to this is for there to be a decision-making here, decision-making in Wales and decision-making in Northern Ireland. They're going to have to take all of this a lot more seriously because, if not, more people are going to raise questions about why they are paying licence fee payments for misinformation. That is what it is. It is misinformation and misreporting." A BBC spokesperson said, "The BBC always sets out to report accurately and comprehensively on issues that matter to audiences in the devolved nations. In all cases, when we are made aware of inaccuracies or notable omissions in our reporting, we'll always aim to set things right at the earliest opportunity. We did this with the story about the Scottish budget mentioned by Mr Robertson, but this is one error in a whole day of extensive coverage. We've recently had dialogue with Mr Robertson about our coverage, and we are grateful to him for raising some specific points with us." That article was written by arts correspondent Brian Ferguson and recorded by me, Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 26th of February 2026, Politics. Douglas Ross apologises after being removed from Holyrood, by journalist Gabriel Mackay. Douglas Ross has apologised for refusing to leave the Holyrood chamber after accusing the presiding officer of bias. The former Scottish Conservative leader accused Alison Johnson, who was a member of the Scottish Greens, of favouring both her former party and the SNP during a debate on Tuesday evening. After being invited to withdraw the remark, Mr Ross said he would, even though I believe it. Ms Johnson then told Mr Ross to leave the chamber, which he did not do for some time, even when security was called. The Conservative MSP was suspended from Parliament for Wednesday's sitting and on Thursday offered an apology. Speaking in the chamber, Mr Ross said, "Presiding officer, on a point of order, can I repeat the personal apology I gave to you yesterday and extend that to other members of the entire chamber? By refusing to leave when asked by you on Tuesday night, I accept and acknowledge that my behaviour fell well short of what should be expected from MSPs." On Wednesday, a Scottish Conservative spokesperson said, "Douglas Ross has apologised to the presiding officer for refusing to leave the chamber last night and accepted his one-day ban from the chamber." The Scottish Conservatives remain focused on holding the SNP to account of the Lord Advocate, tipping off John Swinney about the case involving Nicola Sturgeon's husband. By Gabriel Mackay. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 26th of February 2026. From the news section, Scots pensioner reported missing while hiking near Tarbet, by Josh Pizzuto-Pamako. Extensive searches are underway after a Scottish pensioner went missing on Monday while hill-walking. George Smith, 64, was last seen on Monday when he drove to Tarbet to go hiking. Smith, who is from Stranraer, is described as white, around 5 foot 8 inches, and of medium build with greying red hair. He was wearing a red and black jacket. Smith is also known to travel to the Glasgow area. Police Scotland Inspector Bart Simonis said, "It is completely out of character for George not to keep in regular contact with his family, and he has not returned home." His car was found parked in Tarbet off the A83. Simonis added, "We believe he headed for Crouch Tarbet and Glenloyne." Extensive searches are being carried out in these areas, with officers being assisted by mountain rescue teams and specialist search advisors. If you have seen George since Monday the 23rd of February, or have any information that may assist our investigation, please contact Police Scotland through 101, quoting incident number 2630 of 25th of February 2026. That report was written by Josh Pizzuto-Pamako. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 26th of February 2026. From the sports section. Every child in Scotland to learn to swim under new scheme. Report written by Rose Moncur. A new programme will give primary school children the chance to learn to swim and gain vital water safety skills for free. The Scottish Government has announced the National Primary School Swimming Framework, a universal offer for all primary pupils. The scheme is backed by £2 million in funding for its first year and is part of a wider effort to increase physical activity. Watching pupils learning the basics at a pool in Edinburgh, Marie Todd, Scotland's Sport Minister, said, "We believe that every child, regardless of their background, should be given the opportunity to learn to swim, a core skill that can save lives. There is no better time to offer them that chance than now. We are preparing for a spectacular summer of sport, which will see Scotland welcome some of the world's best swimmers to Glasgow, and having elite sportsmen and women competing live on our doorstep is an experience which can only serve to inspire." This investment is part of an additional £40 million of funding for sport, enabling more people to get active and enjoy the wide-ranging physical and mental health benefits that will last long after this year's World Cup and Commonwealth Games have come to a close. The investment comes as part of a wider £40 million boost for sport announced in the Scottish Government's 2026-27 budget. Of this, £20 million will support the resilience of sporting organisations, while the remaining £20 million will fund new physical activity opportunities for children and young people. Swimmer Duncan Scott, who has won 8 Olympic medals and 13 Commonwealth medals across 3 games, has welcomed the announcement. He said, "I am delighted to see the Scottish Government commitment and investment in school swimming to keep children safer and more confident in, on and around water. As an island nation with so much access to water, it's critical that primary school children have access to basic swimming and water safety skills." John Lunn, Chief Executive of Scottish Swimming, also expressed support for the programme. Mr Lunn said, "It's fantastic to see this commitment to school swimming after a long-fought campaign to ensure children have access to basic swimming and water safety skills. This is an investment in the future, a future where children are equipped with critical life skills." That report was written by Rose Moncur and read by E. McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 26th of February 2026, Sport. Pundits' view on Celtic's title chances this season, by Ryan McGinley. Former Celtic player and current pundit Chris Sutton has had his say on the title race this season, which looks set to go down to the wire. The current holders are in a 3-way battle with Rangers, and Hearts for the Scottish Premiership crown, with just 6 points separating the three sides at the time of writing. Speaking on Sky Sports, Sutton gave his opinion on how the league will transpire ahead of the Glasgow Derby, which takes place this Sunday at Ibrox. Hearts are in the driving seat, he said. My gut feeling is that all three sides will drop points on this run. I'd rather be where Hearts are, with a 4-point gap in Rangers. Celtic have a game in hand, but Celtic don't have the strength that they've had in previous seasons. I'm certainly sure Celtic will have got up their game if they want to win the title, but I just can't see it for Celtic this season. On his former side's recruitment in January, Sutton continued, I thought it would be about the January arms race to see who would get the better of that, and Celtic are at the bottom of it. Their recruitment has not been on point by any stretch of the imagination. That article was written by Ryan McGinley and read by Ian McKenna.
The following letter is also found in the Herald in the opinion section on Thursday the 26th of February 2026. The headline, Bulldoze Energy Policy. Just when we thought the environmental damage couldn't get any worse, your correspondent advocating pumped storage and claiming it is renewable energy is quite simply wrong. Herald Letters, February 17. Pumped storage is by definition not renewable energy. This erroneous belief demonstrates perfectly the hidden environmental and financial costs and how utterly useless hundreds of giant, short-lived industrial wind turbines carpeting our hills and now seas are at providing constant, reliable energy as and when required. For example, the concrete required in hydro storage plants for a paltry few minutes of backup energy is 18 times greater than a nuclear plant, which provides constant baseload power day in, day out, 365 days a year. Nuclear plants in the UK require 2,025 times less land than wind farms. Sorry, subsidy farms, because that's what they really are. Remember how dry last summer was? Water was a very scarce commodity. Scotland's scenic grandeur and the Great Glen should be permanently protected for us and our children to inherit. It really is the beating heart of our tourist industry and ought not to be trashed any further by bulldozers and pylons because of an ill-thought-out energy policy. George Herity, Moray. Our concluding letter is also from the Herald on Thursday the 26th of February 2026 and it's also found in the opinion section. Challenging PM's record should be encouraged. I write regarding criticisms made by Anna Sarwar of Sir Keir Starmer. It should be accepted that Sir Keir ran a brilliant general election campaign addressing the worst UK national debt since 1945. He didn't tell lies or make false promises and was clear that tough financial decisions were unavoidable and would take years to fully implement. Once Labour was elected with a large majority, the electorate forgot this. One half of them wanted more benefits, the other half wanted less tax, which was never realistic. Sir Keir understood how to right some wrongs, where there was a sound legal case, including tackling the post office and infected blood scandals where justice was denied by previous governments. Also, long-standing concerns over co-workers' pensions was at last addressed. As time went on, it was clear that there must be some amelioration of harsh financial policies, which was all well and good. However, a Prime Minister has to be a politician as well as a lawyer, and the polls turned badly, perhaps unfairly, against Sir Keir. Worse was to come, with a series of misjudgments and apologies, particularly relating to appointments to high office. Sir Keir should think hard before acting on future appointees. Politics is not a cosy occupation. It's tough and competitive. And Labour's Scottish leader, Anna Sarwar, is tough, competitive and challenging. Scottish Labour was never a mere branch office, which is something only empty heads say when they cannot muster any other criticism. It's only right that Mr Sarwar should challenge the PM on policies that are bad for Scotland, despite the extra funding given to the Scottish Government. Policies including the banning of new licences for the exploration of potential oil and gas reserves while continuing importation from across the ocean. This isn't just environmentally illiterate, it's bad news for Scottish jobs and incomes. Meanwhile, renewable energy is claimed to be cheap. However, Scotland produces more than the rest of the UK, yet our prices are higher, and the policy of zonal pricing was rejected by the UK government, which is bad for Scotland. After the foolish Brexit referendum, we must get closer to Europe again, though this could mean giving away fishing rights, which will certainly be bad for Scotland. In conclusion, Mr Sarwar is right to challenge Sir Keir Starmer regarding his effectiveness, while Sir Keir must address those challenges and make the necessary policy changes. Ralph Barker Crawford. That concludes the letter selection from today's Herald. These letters from the Herald are from a selection on Thursday the 26th of February 2026. They are found in the opinion section, and the headline for our opening letter is "Keep the Royal Family, but they must evolve with the times." With the UK's respect for traditions, it is only natural that we observe that Bible of parliamentary procedure, Thomas Erskine May's treatise on parliamentary practice, and remain a monarchy instead of becoming a republic. However, recent events surrounding the royal family suggest it is vital to look anew at the part it plays in the life of the UK, ensuring that its evolution is in line with the demands of a modern democracy. In this day and age, the servility of subjects to a monarch is no longer appropriate. Rather, everyone, regardless of rank or wealth, must live under the law of the land and be treated equally according to the strictures of that law. It is time that the privileges accorded to members of our so-called ruling family were removed to make it more streamlined, with remaining members truly public servants, receiving salaries for public duties they perform on behalf of the state. In this capacity, members would continue to perform ceremonial duties associated with their positions as honorary heads of state, acting as representatives of the UK in visits abroad and receiving visiting foreign dignitaries. They would smooth the diplomatic path between nations using this form of soft power. While the truncated royal family would retain its position in those areas, the supernumerary royals would no longer be supported by funds from the public purse. They would be expected to earn a living under their own steam, thus ensuring they don't become a burden on the state until circumstances demand that they are called upon to carry out duties in the capacities previously outlined. Those dedicated to the service of the state would not be allowed to retain the mystique which currently surrounds fully active royal family members. They would be accountable and face media scrutiny without the special restrictions currently accorded them. Also, they would appear before parliamentary committees on a regular basis to answer questions considered relevant in relation to their public activities. A full account of their expenses and earnings in public capacities should be made known and considered taxable, in the same way every other citizen is treated by HMRC. Active royals carry out work beneficial to the UK, much like many other workers, so they should expect to conform to the rules and regulations under which every citizen operates. Such an evolution, as described, would allow us to maintain the facade of monarchy. It would respect the traditions of the office, meaning there would be no need for the UK to become a republic with an honorary elected president carrying out many soft power duties. Dennis Bruce, Bishop Briggs. This article is from the Herald on Thursday the 26th of February 2026. It is found in the opinion section, and the headline is "What Nadia Hussein's move into teaching tells us about Britain today," and the report is by Neil Mackay. The chef has lost her BBC gig and is now working as a classroom assistant. Why are people laughing at her choice instead of praising her? Asked Neil Mackay. Isn't teaching children one of the most valuable roles in society? I bore my family to distraction with my obsession for TV cookery shows. Keith Floyd taught me to cook when I was about 14 years old. I graduated through the ranks of Delia Smith, my Svengali and Sear, Rick Stein, go-to for seafood, if somewhat annoying in a posh boy way, and even the hairy bikers, who I loved for the warm wee glow their friendship gave me. Plus, they were infallible when it came to an old-fashioned pie. It was great when Nadia Hussain arrived, fresh from the Great British Bake Off. Not a show I'm much fond of, thanks to its insufferable tweeness and the fact that I'm a C-grade baker at best. She was a font of knowledge on using spices and intriguing recipes, though I must confess that one or two of her curries left me rather meh. So I've kept an eye on what's been happening to Hussain since the BBC decided in its endless stupidity to get rid of her. Of course, the broadcaster said it has simply chosen not to commission another cookery show with Nadia. But let's be honest, they hoofed her out the door unceremoniously, and the move was damn stupid. Hussain filled a real gap in British cookery shows. Where were the modern-day Madhur Jaffreys or Ken Holmes of old until she arrived? Like Jaffrey and Home, Hussain offered authenticity, an approach to cooking which came from her own home, her own family, and her own culture. That's half the point of a good meal. It's a way of understanding and identifying with other people and places. Travel via the taste buds. Some folk feel that axing Hussain was an attack on that great phantasm of the far right, diversity, equality, and inclusion. I couldn't say. I'm not privy to BBC decisions. I certainly think, however, that it doesn't help issues around unity in a divided country to bin a well-known successful Muslim woman for no apparent reason from a popular TV slot. If Hussain's past life as a TV cook has some instructive moments for us, then her life post-fame is equally enlightening, although again, the lessons aren't particularly appetising. Hussain told Woman and Home magazine that she was currently working as a teaching assistant at a lovely little primary school. The plan is, she says, to become a teacher. Hats off to you, Nadia. As a young woman, she wanted to go to university, but her parents wouldn't support her. She eventually earned her degree in childhood and youth studies from the Open University, and now she's putting her education to good use. To me, that's a wonderful story. She got knocked down and got back up again, this time doing a job that is genuinely useful and important to society. Sure, I enjoyed her TV shows, but I prefer more classroom assistants and more teachers to more celebrity chefs any day of the week. You'd think folk would be cheering on the underdog, right? Wrong. This is Britain in 2026. You only kick folk these days. You don't celebrate them unless they're a total B, of course. Hussain came in for the inevitable and disgraceful race hate that marks this country today. But there was another strand woven into the reaction to her move into teaching, mockery and derision. Not just of Hussain, but of the job she'd chosen. There were those who delighted in seeing a tall poppy cut down, laughing at her seemingly falling on hard times, though I'm sure she's just fine financially after all those TV shows and books and could buy and sell her detractors. Such creatures have always existed. It was the assault on teaching, though, which spoke of the terrible erosion in our values as a society. Hussain said people asked her, "Why would you go from being here, right at the top, to being at the bottom?" That one sentence is an inversion of everything our society should be. Fame is meaningless. I've no respect for celebrity. Indeed, I consider it a dirty word, the definition of intellectual squalor and vapidity. Teaching, however, is perhaps the most noble job available to any citizen. To be given the task of helping raise and educate children is to be entrusted with our future. Yet teachers are treated in the same disposable fashion by society and government as the BBC treated Nadia Hussain. Teachers are told what to teach. They aren't empowered, even though they know best. They are given few resources. They have no functioning means of instilling control in schools. They carry the can for any failures in education, and they work long hours, suffer violence, and receive a middling wage for their troubles. I'd pay teachers far more than any oafish politician. If we valued our children, we'd value the people who teach them, yet we don't. I recently discussed the policy of non-exclusion in schools with an expert on criminal justice. They supported in never expelling any pupil ever, even if they assaulted staff. In which other profession would it be okay to effectively deem violence against workers irrelevant? Another of my obsessions, cookery shows aside, is the book Utopia, written by Thomas More in 1516. In it, he imagines a world where teachers are among the most valued members of society, and every single adult is responsible for helping teachers educate the young. I, for instance, would perhaps be mandated to spend a few weeks annually helping out with English lessons or media studies. A doctor might assist in biology class. Every single citizen would have a role in mentoring and extracurricular activities, making schools the centre of civic life. Instead of utopia, though, we have chosen dystopia, where fame is prized and teaching our own children is seen as worthless. If you know any teachers, you'll understand how much they value classroom assistants. Half the problems in our schools are down to the lack of classroom assistants. Hussein should be cheered from the rafters. She could have entered the absurd demimonde of the influencer to make a living. Instead, she chose to work with children. The dispiriting response proves what a back-to-front society we have fashioned for ourselves, and hell mend us for that. That report was by Neil Mackay.
The Herald on the 27th of February, and the news section is Glasgow City Council waste scheme being abused, by Gabriel Mackay. Companies could be abusing a free waste disposal scheme for housing associations, with hundreds of vans dumping unspecified rubbish at sites in Glasgow. The union has warned that hundreds of vans per day are using recycling centres, with staff shortages meaning there is no way to check what is being dumped. In 2018, Glasgow City Council took the decision to offer free bulk disposal for household waste for all housing associations in the city. Previously, council staff would have been deployed to collect waste, but after the charge changes, more than 70 housing associations can register to use the recycling centres free of charge. The council makes clear that commercial waste will not be accepted, but the GMB union has warned the system could be being abused with no proper monitoring or protocol. Video provided to the Herald shows a huge queue of fans waiting to access the centre at Shield Hall, which workers say is a daily occurrence. The union believes contractors are mixing debris and rubble from commercial sites in with household waste in order to avoid paying to have it disposed. John Slavin, GMB organiser for Glasgow City Council, told the Herald the queues are there day in, day out. Perhaps all of these vans are only carrying bulk uplifts from housing associations, but given the length of the queues, surely it's worth checking. There is a suspicion that some of these loads are commercial waste coming in from all over the place, so why should Glasgow Council taxpayers have to dispose of it for no charge? Commercial operators should be charged £180 for every tonne, but these vans are allowed to dump for free without question. We do not know how much it might be costing council taxpayers because no one is asking. Meanwhile, residents in the housing associations are also being asked to pay for bulk uplifts. There's only one winner, and it's not the tenants, it's not the taxpayers, and it's not the people of Glasgow. The scheme was brought in to minimise rent increases and service charges, but proposed social rent increases for 2026 range from 3.6% to above 7%. The union has written to councillors to express their concerns over the situation. In the letter signed by GMB Glasgow Branch 40, Secretary John O'Connor and convener Chris Mitchell says, financially this has been a catastrophic deal for Glasgow Council taxpayers. The small savings in council tax being deployed to lift this waste is dwarfed by the huge revenue loss of this waste going over toll bridges for free. As a council, you have a public responsibility to ensure efficient running of public services in the interests of the public of Glasgow, and we ask for a proper cost analysis which looks at personnel savings in contrast to the loss of revenue, which GMB is confident would demonstrate a huge detriment to Glasgow. We believe the system is being abused. Without any proper monitoring or proper protocol, the reality is that housing associations and other bodies are simply dumping their waste in huge quantities. The lack of staff is resulting in there being no checks and balances. We strongly suspect that proper environmental standards for waste disposal are not being met. On any given day, our frontline workers are forced into a chaotic situation with literally hundreds of those vans dumping unspecified waste. We also consider this a health and safety risk to our members. The branch is calling for an immediate review, including cost analysis, the establishment of a protocol on how the policy is administered, and a monitoring team to ensure environmental standards are being met. A Glasgow City Council spokesperson said, "Our household waste and recycling centres are free for use by Glasgow residents, and housing associations are permitted to access to the Council's transfer stations to bring in bulky waste generated by the tenants free of charge. Housing associations and their subcontractors are required to use a booking system to access our waste centres, and this helps us to control the waste that is brought in for disposal. We are working with housing associations to ensure the register of subcontractors they use is fully up to date, and those contractors are aware of the booking in process. We have asked housing associations to ensure they bring fully loaded vehicles to our waste centres, as this helps to minimise the amount of journeys they are required to make. Housing associations supporting the city's waste management system is helping to ensure communities are kept in good condition. Housing associations removing bulky waste left in bin courts ensures our refuse collection staff gain access to household bins, and this helps to minimise missed bin collections. GMB, one of the biggest unions in the public sector, is calling commercial waste uplift to return in-house at the council with their Reclaim Our Lanes campaign. Mrs. Slevin said a publicly run service would mean proper bins, accountable collections, fair pricing and real enforcement. Our members in cleansing are on the front line across Glasgow and care about the city in a way contractors are only interested in profits, never will. And that was by Gabriel Mackay. The Herald on the 27th of February and the news section. Scottish Labour MP calls on Keir Starmer to resign, by Andrew Learmonth. Scottish Labour MP has called on Sir Keir Starmer to resign as Prime Minister after Labour slumped to third place in one of its safest seats in a shock by-election defeat to the Greens. Brian Leishman said the result in Gorton and Denton showed voters had rejected the bad judgment calls of Prime Minister and his advisers. The Green Party's Hannah Spencer secured 14,980 votes, 40.7% of those cast, and a majority of 4,402. Reform UK finished second on 10,578 votes, 28.8%, while Labour's Angeliki Stoggia came third with 9,364 votes, down sharply from the 18,555 secured in the 2024 general election. Mr. Leishman, the MP for Alloa and Grangemouth, has long been said voters had rejected Labour because of the direction Keir Starmer and the people around him have taken our Labour Party. The societal issues communities up and down the country face need real Labour Party values in government to benefit the millions of people that have become worse off after Tory austerity and the cost of living crisis. Making things fairer, more equal and improving people's lives should always be the mission of the Labour Party. Instead, Keir Starmer made a selfish mistake in blocking Andy Burnham from standing, and it's yet another example of him and his advisers making bad judgment calls. I've said it for a long time now. The Prime Minister has taken our Labour Party in the wrong direction by trying to out-reform reform. We need to be a proper Labour government and live by real Labour Party values. He has proved that he's not the leader that can and will do that. He has got to go for the good of Scotland, the UK and the party. Sir Keir's leadership has already been under pressure in Scotland, with Anna Sarwar calling for the Prime Minister to quit earlier this month. Labour Party activists are gathering in Paisley for the Scottish Labour Conference today. The Prime Minister is not attending. Mr Sarwar told BBC Radio Scotland, "Look, I've stated my view, but my focus in the next 10 weeks is going to be what happens in Scotland." He argued that voters north of the border would not automatically link Labour's performance in England with the Scottish political landscape, claiming the dynamics were fundamentally different after nearly 2 decades of SNP rule. It demonstrates that people everywhere feel angry, feel frustrated, and that the electorate is volatile, he said. But I think we do need to be careful not to have an automatic read across to what's happening in Scotland, because of course in Scotland and the establishment for the last 20 years has been the SNP, and I think that will be very different framing for an election in 10 weeks' time here in Scotland. Mr Sarwar said his role was not to commentate on UK politics, but to try and persuade people in Scotland. He pointed to recent by-elections across Britain as evidence that political behaviour varied sharply by nation. While Labour had lost one to Reform and another to Greens, they had one in Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse. We had a by-election in Scotland. Scottish Labour beat the SNP and gained a seat, and it demonstrates to you that politics is different in different parts of the country, and that people in Scotland know that the choice they face in 10 weeks is whether we have a new government and a new First Minister, and only I can deliver that. Reform can't win here. The SNP don't deserve to win. In constituency after constituency across this great country, only Scottish Labour can beat the SNP, he added. Asked about Sir Keir's absence from the party's upcoming conference, Mr Sarwar stressed that voters would be judging him rather than the Prime Minister. "I am the candidate for First Minister. Of course, it's a one-day conference rather than the traditional 3-day conference. Keir Starmer is not on the ballot paper. He was never coming to this conference. I'm standing to be First Minister. People deserve to know what my view is and what I'm going to do differently in this country." Labour MP Carl Turner told BBC's Radio 4's Today programme the result was catastrophic for his party. He criticised Sir Keir for Bloc Andy Burnham's bid to contest the by-election. "I mean, that's the truth. It couldn't be any worse. Having the Greens in Manchester is the worst result we could have expected or we wanted, frankly. But you know, the reality is Burnham was blocked. He should have been, in my view. It shouldn't have been, in my view." Mr Turner said unpopular policy is the reason Labour came third and lost their majority in the Greater Manchester constituency. "This is the stuff on Gaza and Palestine and build-up of policy which is unpopular," Mr Turner, the MP for Kingston upon Hull East, said. And frankly, the fact that Andy Burnham was blocked, he was a candidate who gave us our best chance. That's why we are where we. Sir John Curtis cautioned that the result could not be viewed solely as a verdict on Sir Keir's personal leadership, arguing instead that 2 of the key foundations of Labour's traditional electoral coalition have crumbled away. He said Labour's relative strength among working-class voters had largely disappeared in recent years, with Reform increasingly appealing to that demographic, while the party had also lost ground among minority voters and younger voters, groups that proved decisive in Gorton and Denton. The future of British politics is now even more uncertain than it was already, Prof. Curtis added. And that was by Andrew Lamont.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 2nd of March 2026, from the opinion section. The retail angle on the Chancellor's spring statement. Article written by David Lonsdale. With all eyes on tomorrow's spring statement, David Lonsdale of the Scottish Retail Consortium considers whether the intent to avoid tinkering with the financial dials will hold. Mr Lonsdale will be among the expert panellists at the Herald budget briefing. All eyes tomorrow will be on the Chancellor's spring statement, and the Treasury has been at pains to stress this won't involve major fiscal policy announcements. Instead, the focus is to be on the Office for Budget Responsibility's forecasts for economic growth, investment and public spending. In essence, it's a half-term report on whether the government is beginning to deliver on its pledges to reboot the economy and bring down the deficit, and ultimately the national debt. This will come as something of a relief to retailers after recent UK budgets which tightened the fiscal screws on the industry, principally the swinging increase to employers' national insurance contributions, and led to higher prices for shoppers. However, it will be interesting to see if the intent to avoid tinkering holds, given the recent feeble GDP growth figures and the upcoming parliamentary elections across Scotland and Wales and local government elections in England. This is especially so after several prominent policy reversals over winter fuel payments, the timing of English local elections, and on taxes affecting farms and pubs. If there is to be a twiddling of the fiscal dials, it would be good to see measures which lift consumers' propensity to spend rather than save, and which help rather than hinder retailers' ability to keep down prices. After all, there are few routes to economic growth which don't involve improved levels of consumer spending. If the Chancellor remains reluctant to turn on the public spending spigot, then there are measures her government could take to pep up private sector confidence and commercial investment, and which involve little or no cost to taxpayers. These include fast-tracking the delivery of infrastructure and planning consents for development, and easing the regulatory burden on business. Employment costs, for example, have shot to the very top of the retail industry's list of concerns, according to our latest survey. This is little surprise for a nationally significant industry like retail, which is the country's largest private sector employer, with 230,000 Scots and almost 3 million people across the UK employed directly in it. The aforementioned changes to employers' national insurance and successive above-inflation uplifts to the national living wage have pushed up the cost of employing people and, the survey reveals, has led to fewer hours and less overtime being offered, as well as a reduction in headcount. A third of retailers report a freeze on recruitment and a shift in investment towards automation rather than jobs. Separately, ONS data shows that over the past year, there has been a reduction of 74,000 jobs in the industry across the UK, so clearly we can't take the availability of retail jobs for granted. The current concern relates to aspects of the Employment Rights Act. The Act was passed by Parliament prior to Christmas and includes sweeping changes to industrial relations and employment laws. However, much of the detail is still to be thrashed out and finalised, and will ultimately be implemented through secondary legislation. Retailers are behind much of what is being proposed and have a vested interest in seeing rogue employers dealt with more effectively. However, aspects to do with guaranteed hours and shift-based working have still to be worked through. Getting the implementation right will raise standards while supporting retailers' ability to continue to offer flexible and local jobs across the country. Get the implementation wrong, and it will add complexity and cost, stripping away entry-level and part-time job opportunities at precisely the moment the country needs them most, as unemployment, especially for young people, is rising. Over and above achieving a mutually satisfactory landing zone on changes to employment rules, there is one further move the Chancellor could usefully take at no cost to the public purse. The last UK budget was held much later than normal, at the very end of November, slap bang during peak trading for the retail industry in the lead-up to Christmas. The long drawn-out process and resulting speculation, coupled with already weak consumer confidence, didn't help. Scheduling future fiscal events much earlier so they don't impinge on the key retail trading period would be appreciated on the high street. David Lonsdale is director of the Scottish Retail Consortium. The article was read to you by Elizabeth.
From the Herald, Monday, 2nd March 2026, Sports section. Hearts title odds slashed after Rangers vs Celtic draw. By Ewan Payton, sports writer. Heart of Midlothian's odds to lift the Scottish Premiership title have been slashed after the weekend's action. The Jambos defeated Aberdeen 1-0 on Saturday thanks to a solitary Claudio Braga first-half goal. This meant Derry McGuinness and his players could put their feet up yesterday when watching Rangers and Celtic lock horns. Glasgow's Big Two cut each other's throats with a 2-2 draw at Ibrox, which saw Hearts end the weekend with a comfortable 6-point gap over Rangers in second spot, while Celtic are 8 adrift, albeit they have a game in hand. Betfair spokesperson James Mackay said, following another weekend of drama in the Scottish Premiership title race, odds have been slashed on Hearts to lift the title. Derek McInnes' side are now as short as evens to go all the way, having previously been 11-8, while Rangers and Celtic have seen their odds drift to 5-2 after sharing the Derby Day spoils on Sunday. Elsewhere, Motherwell are just 12-1 to go all the way, having seen off Dundee at Fir Park. That article was by Ewan Payton. From the Herald, Monday, 2nd of March, 2026. Sports section. Hearts the real winners from Rangers and Celtic's frailties. By Stephen McGowan, sports writer at large. A man's 74th birthday should be a sedate affair. A visit from the grandchildren should be followed by a spot of gardening or fishing, a scenic drive, or a quiet meal down the local. Where some septuagenarians like to potter around the shed, put their feet up, or carpet bomb around, Martin O'Neill finished his big day by pulling warring Celtic and Rangers players apart, as Hearts manager Derry McInnes sat watching at home, raising a toast in his honour. Recently, Hearts fans have developed a habit of bemoaning Celtic's late goals. When Rio Hatate forced his equalising penalty kick home at the third time of asking in the 90th minute, they could barely believe their luck. When Rangers threatened to rout their bitter rivals during a one-sided first half, peace in the Middle East seemed more likely. A draw between these two imperfect football teams was always their perfect scenario. The proof that craved that Celtic and Rangers are hopelessly riddled with flaws and inconsistencies that they should now finish a job which looked like becoming a good deal harder when Danny Rowe's team were on course to deliver an Old Firm mauling. O'Neill's first visit to Ibrox as Celtic boss ended in a 5-1 thumping a quarter of a century ago, and during the first 45 minutes when his team selection raised questions, a repeat looked more likely than not. Players in blue were winning every physical battle, every first and second ball, overrunning a rabble who looked more like a Celtic team from 1994 than a side with 13 league titles from the last 14. With Mikey Moore on fire, Hearts began to glance over their shoulders anxiously. Rangers played at times like champions in waiting. You could have paid good money for Kevin Thelwell's thoughts on that point. A decision to pay through the nose for Yusuf Shermiti became a noose around the neck of the former Ibrox sporting director when the £8 million man struggled to hit a barn door with a beach ball. Pitch Shermiti in the big occasion these days, and he is the new Erling Haaland. He scored 2 against Celtic in a 3-1 win at Parkhead. He scored 3 against Hearts in a rousing victory 2 weeks ago. His latest Old Firm double was redolent of Ali McCoist in his Ibrox pomp. The athleticism and timing of the overhead kick which opened the scoring after 8 minutes was magnificent. Recalling a more spectacular Old Firm strike in recent times is a stretch. In September 2003, months after he had taken the club to the UEFA Cup final, O'Neill delivered a sobering glimpse into the club's fiscal future. Dreading the day when Henrik Larsson finally left, a Parkhead board fixated with debt and high costs were beginning to rein in the spending and replace his best players with inferior alternatives. If it is the case, we'll have to get used to life in the slow lane, said the Northern Irish man ruefully. Managed decline was not immediately obvious when he started his last game at Ibrox in 2005. With Craig Bellamy, John Hartson, Chris Sutton, Neil Lennon and Alan Thompson in the team. By the time he pitched up at the same venue with Dane Murray in the shirt Bobo Baldy used to wear, he was difficult to miss. A fourth-choice central defender with an unfortunate habit of cock-ups in big games, he made another one when a horrendous attempt at a slice clearance spun into the path of Shermiti. Another sublime finish and Rangers were 2 up, as Celtic threatened to move on from the slow lane to a toxic ditch by the side of the M8. A 32-year-old Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain gambled around having his pocket picked by a Rangers midfield so rapid and energetic they couldn't possibly keep it going. Early in the second half, they ran out of legs. Hatate was no one's idea of a game-changing Celtic replacement. In recent weeks, the Japanese playmaker has looked like a man running down the clock, a disinterested figure playing out time, until he moves on to MLS or France or somewhere windswept and interesting. Hatate mustered Celtic's first shot on target after 55 minutes, and the dial began to nudge. Moments later, Kieran Tierney marked his 200th start for the club by nodding Benjamin Nyron's cross into the net, and a home support which had met the first half in a state of euphoria began gnawing at their fingernails. Rangers were off it now. They gave the ball away and surrendered possession as Celtic latched on to every loose or second ball and grew in confidence, creating chances to draw level through Dyson Maeda, Hatate and Luke McCowan, before Dujon Sterling's outstretched arms stopped a point-blank Maeda header from finding the net. After a VAR review, a penalty was the right decision. Against Jack Butland, the spot kick is nowhere near the given it should be. The former England number one has now saved 8 out of his last 9 penalties in all competitions. And while he busted out the foil Hatate twice, the substitute rammed the ball home at the 3rd time of asking. Another late Celtic fight back must have been a hell of a relief to substitute McCowan. Players in Glasgow should know that loose slips have the capacity to sink ships before an Old Firm game, and when the midfielder emerged from Thursday night's win over Stuttgart, they claimed that no team in the league touches O'Neill's men when they're at it. He risked post-match ridicule. Celtic are hardly ever at it these days. If the first half is good, the second half is poor. If the first half is awful, they storm back in the second. Putting 2 good halves together seems to be too much to expect. Even after the unlikeliest of points, they're still a good deal closer to 4th place, Motherwell, than they are to 1st place, Hearts. If nothing else, a point means they're still in the hunt with 10 games to play. They can leapfrog Rangers as soon as Wednesday and go second if they win their game in hand in Aberdeen. While Rolls Rangers have 27 points within their grasp, drop points in 4 of their last 6 league games is hardly title-winning form. Play every game like they did the first half yesterday, and they might just do it. Play as they did in the second when they surrendered territory and chances to a Celtic side full of sticking plasters, loans and 4th-choice defenders. They'll be lucky to finish 3rd. The question of whether Hearts can rock Scottish football by going on to win the league should now be redundant. Study 2 rugby teams at Ibrox yesterday, and the question everybody should actually be asking is, exactly who will stop them? That article was by Stephen McGowan.
From Herald, Scotland, 28th of February 2026, from the STEM section of the business section. What are implications for software companies from AI rise? Article by Philip Ray. Shopify founder Toby Lütke recently had an MRI scan as part of his annual health check. This time, instead of downloading expensive software to see the results, he asked Anthropic's Claude Code to handle the raw MRI data. With a single prompt, he told the system to find every report and image, convert them into usable formats, organize what mattered into a structured folder, and build an index page so he could explore the results in his browser. Minutes later, he had a web-based viewer. One more prompt and it began to annotate what it saw. If a broadly trained AI system can assemble and interpret a highly specific medical imaging tool, the idea that specialist software enjoys a defensible moat starts to look fragile. This raises the question of where do value and vulnerability sit in the software industry in the age of AI. For the last decade, many investors have been guided by tech entrepreneur and investor Mark Andreessen's claim that software is eating the world. The idea that digital tools, enabled by software as a service, SaaS, and the cloud would penetrate almost every industry. Now a new narrative has taken hold, that AI will eat software itself. The share prices of many software companies have lagged both AI beneficiaries and the broader US market in recent years, as investors worry that their products could be replicated by AI systems or undercut by new AI-native competitors. Capital flows help illustrate what is happening. At one end of the spectrum are the hyperscale cloud platforms such as Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud. They are committing vast sums to data centers, custom chips, and energy to train and run large AI models. A significant share of this spending flows to NVIDIA and other chip makers, which provide the core computing power and systems on which AI depends. At the other end are the model builders and applied AI companies, many of which are still private. Since the late 2022, they have attracted a growing share of global venture capital. Anthropic is part of this trend. Its Claude models, and particularly Claude Code, are designed to dramatically reduce the time and cost required to turn an idea into working software. Anthropic's revenues have grown rapidly, with revenue per employee far ahead of many established software leaders, highlighting the extraordinary efficiency that AI-native business models can achieve. We believe the idea of AI eating software is misleading. Software is not disappearing, but the balance of value within the system is shifting. The key task is to judge whether a software company's role in its customers' workflows will remain critical once AI agents sit between users and applications. Historically, the big shift in enterprise software was the move from on-premise installations to the cloud. Today, the dividing line is between businesses on the right and wrong side of AI. 3 changes look particularly important. Code is being commoditized. As Claude Code and similar tools improve, the act of writing, testing, and deploying software becomes cheaper and more automated. Value shifts from the code itself to how it is applied. Data and integration into customer organizations becomes the moat. Pricing models come under pressure. Much of the software sector grew on seat-based pricing, where revenue scaled with the number of employees using a product. If AI enables clients to achieve the same or better output with fewer staff, that model looks fragile. We expect a gradual shift towards usage and consumption-based pricing, where customers pay for compute, actions, or transactions. That transition is healthy for products with a clear value proposition, but it exposes those whose economies depended on ever-rising headcount. Fragmented tools are being squeezed. AI agents need clean, well-governed data and reliable scaffolding. This favours platforms that act as systems of record, sitting at the centre of an organisation's data and processes over superficial applications that can be bypassed. In Lutke's MRI example, the Claude model did not care about any particular user interface. It orchestrated files and open-source tools behind the scenes. It is a telling illustration of how AI could interact with other applications as building blocks rather than using the actual product itself. In our view, select software companies are well placed for the AI era and typically have one or more of the following. 1. Deep systems of record, a single source of truth for business data. AI agents may bypass their screens, but they still need the trusted data these platforms contain. 2. Proprietary data. Generic models cannot easily recreate this context without access to the same streams. 3. Infrastructure and orchestration roles. As AI workloads scale, their centrality to the ecosystem should increase. 4. Ecosystem leadership. NVIDIA's combination of specialized chips, CUDA software, and developer loyalty, for example, has made it a default environment for training and serving advanced models. By contrast, the software companies that appear most vulnerable tend to share different traits. Their revenues are tied to seat counts, their workflows are relatively simple, and they lack proprietary data or high switching costs. Those that fail to adapt risk being made obsolete. AI is compressing the cost of writing code and challenging many traditional software moats, while simultaneously increasing the importance of the right infrastructure, data, and deeply embedded systems. For long-term investors, the central task is to distinguish between businesses whose advantages are being eroded and those whose roles in the software stack are becoming more mission-critical. Companies at the heart of critical workflows with valuable, hard-to-replicate data and technical teams willing to embrace AI at pace and scale can continue to offer attractive growth prospects in the years ahead. And that article was written by Philip Ray, who is an investment specialist at Baillie Gifford. It was read to you today by me, Bob Lizer. From Herald, Scotland, 25th of February 2026, from the STEM section of the business section. Glasgow University servers connected to AI almost 70 million times. Article by Josh Pizzuto-Pomacco. Glasgow University servers connected to ChatGPT almost 64 million times in 2025, new figures have revealed. An investigation by student newspaper The Glasgow Guardian found that the servers recorded 63,720,751 connections to ChatGPT last year. Using data obtained via Freedom of Information, FOI, the newspaper reported that 11.5 million connections were recorded in November 2025 alone. Other AI sites were also accessed using Glasgow University servers in 2025. Servers recorded 5,637,811 connections to Microsoft Copilot and 572,447 connections to Google Gemini. That is a total of 69,931,009 connections. Glasgow University's official policy on AI states that the technology is positively transformative as well as disruptive. Guidance on its website reads, "You will graduate into an AI-augmented world. The university therefore has a responsibility to prepare you for this world, providing space to experiment with and understanding the potential of AI in an ethical way. Consequently, rather than seek to prohibit your use of these tools, we want to support you in learning how to use them effectively, ethically, critically, and transparently." However, students are not permitted to use AI to write essays or complete assignments. Anti-plagiarism software employed by the university has the ability to flag AI-generated content, including ChatGPT. One recent graduate from the university told the Glasgow Guardian, "I don't agree with it morally and I don't think it should be used. You can trust the answers and then you end up relying on it because it destroys cognitive function." A second-year English literature student added, "It discourages critical thinking and goes against the entire point of higher education." However, a second-year chemistry student remarked, "AI water usage isn't as bad as people say, and people who bash AI are often ill-informed." According to the BBC, more than 600 Scottish students were accused of misusing AI during their studies in 2024, an increase of 121% from the previous year. And that article was written by Josh Pizzuto-Pomacco.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and tell your friends about our service.